Vivian Crest did not come herself for just anyone. She came with a legal team, a printed offer, and 72 hours, 35% below market. The house belonged to a contract laborer. It should have been simple. Garrett Shaw read it in his doorway with his work boots still on. He folded it once and handed it back. Mr. Shaw. Her voice carried the patience of someone who had already decided. I came myself. You should understand what that means. He looked at her, not past her. At her long enough that the attorney beside him shifted his weight. Then he stepped inside and closed the door. Softly. She thought he had nothing left to play. She didn't know what Elena Shaw had put in that contract. The alarm went off at 5:45, and Garrett was already in the kitchen. He scrambled eggs while Lily's feet hit the floor upstairs. The familiar thud and shuffle that meant she'd slept well. She came down, still pulling her hair into a ponytail, sat at the table, and ate without complaint. He packed her lunch while she finished. A sandwich, an apple, a small bag of crackers she'd eat first and not tell him about. That was the routine, and he left space in it for the things that didn't need to be said. Mrs. Donnelly says we're doing a science fair, Lily said. What's your topic? I don't know yet, she chewed. Can it be about bridges? Bridges work. He nodded like that was settled and drank her orange juice. He dropped her at school by 7:15, then drove the 20 minutes out to a residential job in the Harwick subdivision, a family who'd hired him to pour a new concrete apron and fix a drainage issue along the foundation. He worked without a crew most mornings, which suited him. He knew what needed doing, and he did it without narrating the process. His employer, a contractor named Bev Stokes, ran 2 or 3 jobs at a time and was decent enough. She called him Shaw. Her foreman called him Buddy. Neither of them knew he'd spent 9 years at Meridian Infrastructure, evaluating load-bearing conditions for municipal projects across 6 states, reviewing soil profiles and utility corridor specifications that carried the weight of city blocks above them. Neither of them had reason to ask, and Garrett had never offered it. He'd left Meridian 18 months after Elena died. Not immediately he'd tried to stay, because staying felt like the responsible thing, the thing she would have wanted. But the work had changed for him in a way he couldn't reverse. He understood the physics of load and failure too well. He knew what conditions preceded collapse. He couldn't stop seeing it everywhere. And eventually he couldn't make himself care about the specifications the way they needed to be cared about. So he left, quietly, and found work that let him use his hands without asking anything of him beyond precision and effort. The house on Perrin Street had been Elena's choice. She'd found it before they were married, put down earnest money with her own savings, and walked him through it on a Saturday morning in October, pointing at walls she wanted to move and windows she wanted to add. He'd looked at the foundation, the roof pitch, the grade of the backyard, and told her it was sound. She'd laughed at him for that. She'd said, I already know it's sound. I'm asking if it's ours. It was theirs. He'd repaired it incrementally over the years, repointed the chimney, replaced the porch boards, reframed a doorway that had settled wrong. The work was always done correctly, with materials chosen for longevity over cost. Anyone in the construction industry who looked closely would have noticed that the decisions throughout the house reflected a level of structural understanding that went well beyond what you'd expect from a man who listed his occupation as independent contractor. Nobody looked that closely. On his way home from the Harwick job one evening, he stopped at his neighbor Ruth Calloway's house to fix a rotting porch step she'd mentioned twice in passing. She brought him sweet tea and sat in her chair while he worked. And she talked the way older women talk when they've decided someone needs company, whether or not they've asked for it. You hear about the Mendez family, she said. It wasn't a question. Signed last week. Everybody's signing. She looked down the street. Lot of money they're offering. It's not about the money. She was quiet for a moment. I know that. I knew your wife before I knew you. She picked that house on purpose. She told me about it once. Said she'd read the whole contract herself, every page. Ruth set down her glass, said she'd put something in it she wanted to last. He drove home. After Lily was asleep, he went to the closet shelf and brought down a box Elena had labeled in her handwriting property legal. Inside, under the insurance documents and the original deed, was a secondary agreement, an addendum, 3 pages, notarized, signed in November of 2018. 6 months before she died. He read it again, though he'd read it before. Then he picked up his phone and called a number he hadn't called in 2 years. Daniel, he said when it picked up. "I need you to look at something." On the 14th floor of the Crest Development Building, Marcus Hale spread the site map across the conference table like a man laying down winning cards. He was 51, lean, and moved with the particular confidence of someone who had never been wrong in front of the right people. Or at least had never been caught being wrong. 13 of 14 parcels signed, he said. "We close on 11 next week. The remaining 2 are ahead of schedule on negotiation." Vivian stood at the window with her coffee. The city below was bright and organized from up here. She'd spent 6 years making it look that way from wherever she stood. "The Shaw parcel," she said. "Corner of Perrin and Aldgate." Marcus tapped the map. "Not the largest lot, but it's the connection point for the underground utility corridor. Drainage, fiber, electrical conduit, all of it routes through that corner. Without it, we redesign from scratch. 6 months minimum. 11 million in redesign and delay costs." He refused the initial offer. He didn't engage with it. There's a difference. People who refuse negotiate. People who don't engage need a different kind of pressure. Marcus leaned back. "I'll have an in-person delivery. Make it clear this isn't a conversation anymore." "I'll come," Vivian said. Marcus blinked. "You don't need to. I want him to understand the situation directly." She turned from the window. "Send me the parcel file." Across the table, Claire Moss had the property file open in front of her. She was 31, 2 years into her role as junior counsel. And she read documents the way she'd been trained to all the way through, including the attachments. She had reached a section near the back of the file. The header read Addendum C Secondary Use Restriction. The language was specific, the notary stamp was clear, and the date was November 2018. She looked up at the meeting. Marcus was summarizing the timeline slide. "Marcus," she said. "Claire, we're moving." She looked back down at the page. Then, without announcing it, she photographed it with her phone under the table. She closed the file. That evening, she sat alone at her desk, after the office emptied, and opened the photograph on her screen. She read the addendum a second time. She wrote a single line on a notepad. Then she looked at that line for a long time, thinking about what it would mean to say something, and what it would mean not to. She didn't send it to anyone. Not that night. 72 hours after the first visit, Garrett was still there. The convoy that arrived on Thursday morning was deliberate in its composition. Marcus's car, a company legal vehicle. 2 representatives from the firm Cress had retained for the acquisition. A pair of property management staff who stood near the curb, with the practiced neutrality of people paid to be present without being visible. The neighbors appeared on their porches the way neighbors do when something is about to be decided. Garrett had sent Lily to Ruth's house before 7. He'd made it ordinary, told her Ruth wanted help with something, packed her a snack, driven her over himself. Lily had accepted this without question, the way children accept most things when the adult delivering them is calm. He stood on the front steps when they came up the walk. Vivian was in the group this time. Not behind glass. Not behind a representative. She walked to the base of the steps and looked up at him, with an expression she probably thought was neutral. "I've given this more personal attention than any acquisition this year," she said. "I think you know the offer is fair. It's 35% below what the lot will be worth when your project is complete," Garrett said. "That's not fair. That's convenient." A small tension moved through the group. Marcus stepped forward. He had the practiced ease of someone who had ended a lot of conversations and enjoyed it. "Shaw, you're a contract laborer living in a house you couldn't replace on your income. Don't let pride cost you the one real asset you have." Down the street, Ruth Calloway came off her porch and started walking toward them. One of the legal representatives moved toward her, not aggressive, but sufficient. She stopped at the property boundary and stood with her arms crossed. The representative returned to the group. Garrett reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed an envelope. He descended the 2 steps to the walk and extended it toward the outside legal counsel, not Marcus, not Vivian. The attorney took it, examined the sealed flap, opened it, and read. His expression didn't collapse. It went still. "What is it?" Marcus said. The attorney kept his eyes on the paper. His voice was carefully even. "A formal request for disclosure review of Addendum C in the original purchase agreement for this parcel. Dated November 2018. He's citing a secondary restriction clause and requesting written confirmation of how it was addressed in the acquisition title review. A beat of silence that lasted just long enough. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had it under control in under 2 seconds, but Garrett had been watching for it, and he saw it. The slight recalibration. The decision being made about what face to wear next. "Handle it," Vivian said to the attorney. Her tone was businesslike. The inconvenience of a procedural objection being routed to the appropriate person. She turned and walked back toward the cars. Marcus followed, but before he reached the curb, he peeled off to the left and made a call. His back was to the group. His shoulders were close together. His voice didn't carry. Ruth caught Garrett's eye across the distance. She raised her eyebrows. He gave a small shake of his head. Not yet. The legal convoy left within 10 minutes. Garrett went back inside. He poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen counter and drank it. The house was quiet around him. He could hear the refrigerator. A bird somewhere outside. The tick of the heat coming on. He set down the glass and went back to work. The Caldwell Corridor project had contracted 3 subcontracting firms for different phases of the work, and one of them had hired Garrett through a contact who knew him as a reliable hand and asked no questions beyond whether he could show up on time and follow direction. He signed in at the gate the first Monday as general labor, was assigned to site prep on the eastern section, and spent the day doing what the site required, without distinguishing himself in any direction. He learned the layout of the project quickly. He'd spent 9 years reading construction sites, the way some people read rooms, absorbing the information passively, filing it without effort. By the end of the first day, he understood the scope of what was being built, the sequence of the work, and the places where the work was proceeding on assumptions that the ground beneath them might not support. The second morning, he was assigned near the mobile office, and Owen Tate came out with a rolled set of drawings and spread them on the hood of a pickup to review the day's work. Owen was 52, a site engineer who'd been doing this since before the GPS units they now used to mark grades had existed. He talked to his drawings. He had conversations with them. He found it clarifying. Garrett was stacking form boards nearby. He looked at the sheet from where he stood. He looked for a while, without moving toward it. Then he picked up his notebook. Owen noticed. "Something bothering you?" "The drainage grade on the B7 section." Garrett pointed without touching the drawing. "That soil profile they've noted, it's not accurate for this part of Caldwell. There's a clay lens running about 4 feet down along this corridor. Heavy frost cycles compress it progressively. The corrugated pipe will shear at the joints within 2 or 3 winters." Owen stared at him. "ASCE 7-16 addresses regional soil variability requirements," Garrett said. "They've applied a standard Eastern Virginia profile. This section of Caldwell runs over a different geological substrate. The Meridian Survey from 2016 flagged it." The silence stretched. "Who are you?" Owen said. "Someone who knows this ground." Owen looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he capped his pen. "Come with me." He ordered 3 soil borings along the B7 run the following morning, citing internal review concerns. The borings came back in 48 hours. The clay lens was there, continuous, at 3 feet 10 inches exactly as Garrett had described. The 3-day halt on that section landed in Marcus Hale's inbox as a flag delay. He called Owen directly and demanded the engineering basis for the stoppage. Owen gave him the boring data. Marcus demanded to know who had identified the discrepancy. Owen said it had come out of a review of the original survey materials. This was technically accurate. Vivian arrived at the site on Thursday afternoon. She walked the eastern section with Owen while the crew worked. She asked questions about sequencing and timeline and listened to the answers with the focus of someone who understood that she was getting a managed version of the information and was trying to work through it toward the real version. "Who caught the drainage issue?" she asked. When they'd reached the B7 boundary markers, Owen was quiet for a beat. He looked toward where Garrett was working 20 yards away, resetting form stakes with a mallet, his back to them. "Someone who knows this site better than anyone in our design office," Owen said. Vivian followed his gaze. She saw a man in a canvas jacket driving a stake into compacted earth. Nothing about him announced itself. She looked at Owen. Owen looked at the ground. She didn't ask again. But as she walked back to her car, she glanced twice more toward the eastern section. And the second time Garrett had turned and was looking at something in his notebook, and she had one moment of looking at his face before he moved on. She got in the car. Something had been registered. She didn't yet know what to do with it. Daniel Park flew in from Philadelphia on a Wednesday and met Garrett at a diner 2 miles from the house. He was 44, trim, and moved with the efficiency of someone who had trained himself out of wasting time. He had the addendum printed, annotated in 3 colors, and cross-referenced against county records before he sat down. "It's valid," Daniel said. He set the papers on the table between them and turned them so Garrett could read along. Elena inserted this through the original seller's attorney in November 2018. It's notarized. It was filed with the Caldwell County Recorder's Office within 10 days of signing, and it survived intact through the chain of title when she transferred the deed into joint ownership 6 months later. What does it restrict? Change of use. Any conversion of this parcel from residential to commercial or mixed use within 10 years of the filing date requires written consent from the named beneficiary heir or surviving co-owner. Daniel set his finger on the relevant line. You inherited the restriction right along with the deed. Garrett looked at the paragraph. He'd read it before. He needed to hear it said aloud by someone who understood what it meant. In a room full of lawyers. Press Development never disclosed it, Daniel continued. The title summary Marcus Hale submitted for board approval when they began the Caldwell acquisitions was a condensed version standard practice in volume acquisitions, supposedly. Addendum C wasn't included, which means either their due diligence was genuinely inadequate, or someone on their team identified it and chose not to surface it. Hale, Garrett said. He ran the title review internally rather than through outside counsel. That's unusual at this transaction size. It cuts the number of eyes on the documents. Garrett looked out the window at the parking lot. A woman was loading groceries into a minivan with a child in the cart. There's more, Daniel said. He opened his laptop and turned the screen. I've been reviewing the Series B offering documents Cress filed in January. The asset schedule submitted to investors. He scrolled to a highlighted section. Your parcel is listed, property address, lot dimensions, current estimated value, all included as part of the collateral pool. Garrett looked at the screen. The deed was never transferred, Daniel said. The title is still in your name. Garrett, they submitted land they don't legally own as collateral to secure $8 million from 3 investment partners. If that was intentional, it's securities fraud. If it was negligence, it's still a material misrepresentation. That will matter a great deal to those investors when they find out. The diner was warm. Someone at the counter was eating pie. Does Vivian Cress know? Garrett said. Daniel looked at him carefully. I don't believe so. The Series B was handled almost entirely through Marcus. Her signature is on the final filing, but the underlying asset schedule that was his department. He paused. That said, once litigation starts, that distinction becomes very difficult to maintain. She could be named regardless of what she knew. Garrett was quiet. I need to think about that, he said. That night, Lily drew a picture at the kitchen table, a house, with a tree beside it and 2 stick figures in front. One tall and one short. She slid it across to him without explanation. He looked at it for a long time. We're not going anywhere, bud, he said. She went back to her coloring. He folded the picture carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. On Friday morning, Marcus received notification that the legal review request for Addendum C had been formally escalated by outside counsel to a title dispute proceeding. He read the message in the elevator and sent 3 texts before the doors opened. The first went to his private attorney. The second went to the investor liaison who had managed the Series B close. The third went to a number that wasn't saved under a name. Claire Moss had been watching Marcus navigate the Caldwell file for 6 weeks. She'd watched him reroute document requests through his own assistant rather than the legal intake system. She'd watched him remove a physical folder from the shared cabinet and not return it. She'd watched the way his eyes moved to her whenever she opened anything related to the Shaw parcel. She knew what the addendum said. She knew what the Series B asset schedule said. She'd put them next to each other in her head many times and arrived at the same conclusion each time. What had kept her quiet was simple arithmetic. She was 2 years into this job. She didn't have a partner's name on her wall, and she was not certain that being right was the same as being protected. What changed her mind was watching Marcus issue the order to restart the B7 drainage section despite the boring results that Owen Tate had formally documented. She sat in the meeting and listened to him override a registered engineering concern, because the timeline mattered more to him than the ground beneath the project. And she thought about the parcel and the addendum and the investors, and she decided that the arithmetic had changed. She called Daniel Park from the parking garage on her personal phone. She'd found his name in the county records filing. She spoke for 11 minutes. Then she forwarded him 3 attachments. The original Addendum C from the county recorder's archive, the condensed title summary Marcus had submitted for board approval, and an email chain from March, in which Marcus had explicitly directed the external title firm to work from the condensed version only and not to append secondary agreements. She sat in her car for a few minutes afterward. Then she went back to her desk and cleared her afternoon calendar. Daniel called Garrett at noon. "We have the email," he said. "It's unambiguous. He knew the addendum existed and he buried it deliberately." Garrett was standing in the driveway at the Harwick job with a level in his hand. He set the level down on the hood of his truck. "I need to talk to her first," he said. "Garrett, before we file anything. Directly. If she didn't know, she deserves to decide what she does about it, before a judge does it for her." There was a pause on the line. "You don't owe her that. She came to your house with lawyers." "I know." He picked the level back up. "Set up the formal filing for a week out. Whatever comes after that, comes after." He went to the Crest Development Building the following Tuesday. He didn't have an appointment. He signed in at the lobby security desk, gave his name, and said he needed to speak with Vivian Kress on a matter relating to the Caldwell acquisition. The security attendant told him to please have a seat while she checked availability. He sat in a chair near the window and looked out at the street. An hour passed. He didn't check his phone. He didn't pace. He sat with his hands resting on his knees with the stillness of someone who has learned through long experience that patience and passivity are not the same quality, and that the difference matters. Vivian came through the lobby at 11:10, moving fast, talking to her assistant with the focused brevity of someone carrying 3 things in her head simultaneously. She saw Garrett and stopped. The recognition was immediate. She'd seen him once at the site, half a second 20 yards away. She'd filed it without knowing why. Now the file opened. She said something brief to her assistant without looking away from Garrett. 5 minutes, she said to him. "That's enough," he said. She took him to a conference room on the 8th floor, not her office. She stood near the door rather than sitting. He came to the table, set down 2 documents, and stepped back. "The first is Addendum C from the original purchase agreement on my parcel," he said. "The second is the relevant page from your Series B asset schedule." She came to the table and looked at the documents. She read them with the focus of someone who understood what she was reading. The room was very quiet. She didn't speak for almost 30 seconds. Then she opened the door and said one word to the assistant visible through the glass. "Claire." Claire came in. She looked at the documents on the table. She didn't perform surprise. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment to arrive and had decided how she would handle it. "Did you know about this?" Vivian said. "I identified the addendum 6 weeks ago," Claire said. "I tried to raise it in the acquisitions meeting." Marcus redirected the agenda. Vivian looked at the table. Then she looked at Garrett. "Why come to me directly?" He held her eyes. "Because if you didn't know, you had the right to decide what to do about it before it became a courtroom. And because the project itself isn't wrong. What was done around it is wrong." She studied him the way you study something that doesn't match what you were told it was. "I'll need to verify these," she said. "Take whatever time you need. They're original documents." He picked up his jacket and walked out. He didn't look back. Owen Tate called Garrett that evening while he was washing the dinner dishes. "Hale sent a directive this afternoon," Owen said. "Restart the B7 drainage work. Proceed on approved design," his words. "Disregard the boring results as non-material variation." Garrett turned off the faucet. "When does work start?" "Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock. Unless someone stops it. Can you get a work stoppage order through the city engineer's office tonight? Based on the boring data and a formal safety concern filing." Owen was quiet. "If I submit the documentation myself, as the engineer of record on site, yes. The city can issue a hold within 24 hours. But Garrett, this is going to blow everything wide open." Hale will know exactly where it came from. The pipe was going to fail anyway, Owen. We're just deciding when it happens and who gets hurt. A long pause. All right, Owen said. Tonight, Garrett dried his hands and stood at the kitchen window. Outside, the street was empty. The Mendez house 2 lots down had a for sale sign in front of it. Now new owners coming, people who didn't know the neighborhood yet. He thought about Elena reading that addendum at the kitchen table, leaning over it with her pen, making sure every line said exactly what she intended. She'd always read everything twice. Garrett and Daniel arrived at the Caldwell site at 6:50 the following morning. The work stoppage order from the city engineer's office was valid, signed, and current. Owen met them at the gate with his sight binder under one arm and walked them through without ceremony. The crew arrived at 7. They looked at the posted order and at Owen, and then began their morning routines, waiting for direction. No equipment started on the B7 section. Marcus arrived at 8:15. He came through the gate looking at his phone and didn't see them until he was well inside the perimeter. When he looked up, he stopped. He recognized Garrett. Whatever calculation he performed in the next 2 seconds, it ran fast. His expression settled into something controlled. You have no standing on this site, Marcus said. Daniel held up the stoppage order without speaking. Marcus didn't take it. He looked past them at Owen, who was standing by the equipment shed with his arms crossed and his binder under his arm. You filed this? The boring data filed it, Owen said. I just signed my name. The boring results were reviewed and determined non-material by you, Owen said. Not by a licensed geotechnical engineer. Not by the city. By you in a memo that will look very interesting alongside the results themselves. The site was quiet around them. The crew had gone still. Vivian's car came through the gate at 8:40. She walked toward them with the particular quality of someone who has made a decision she intends to hold and has no interest in rehearsing it. She stopped a few feet from the group. She looked at Marcus. She looked at Garrett. She looked at Daniel's briefcase. Show me what you have, she said. Daniel opened the briefcase on the field table and laid out the documentation in order. The addendum, the Series B asset schedule, the condensed title summary, the March email chain. He walked through the sequence plainly, without theater. The addendum existed and was valid. The parcel had never legally transferred. Its inclusion in the Series B collateral pool was a material misrepresentation to investors. The March email demonstrated the omission was not accidental. Marcus began to speak. He spoke with the fluency of someone who had prepared for this, who had a version of events ready and believed he could make it land. He said the addendum had been reviewed and deemed non-material by the title firm. He said, the condensed summary was an industry-standard format. He said the Series B filing had been prepared in good faith with the information available. Daniel set the March email on the table. Use the condensed summary only. Do not append secondary agreements. Marcus looked at the email. He looked at it for a moment longer than a man, with nothing to hide, would need to. Then he turned toward Vivian. You're not going to let a former construction worker blow up a $400 million project over a paperwork technicality. Garrett looked at him. He didn't raise his voice. The words came out level and clean, with the weight of something that had been carried a long time. That clause was written by my wife. She put it there because she believed that a place people call home deserves to be protected by law. You knew it existed. You chose to bury it. No one spoke. Owen looked at the ground. The crew members near the shed had gone completely still. Daniel kept his eyes on the table. Vivian looked at Marcus with an expression that had no heat in it, which was worse than heat. Don't say anything else, she said quietly. Call your attorney. Marcus held her eyes for a moment. Then he walked toward his car with the careful pace of someone refusing to be seen moving quickly. Vivian watched him go. Then she turned to Garrett. Something in her face had reorganized itself, not softened exactly. Clarified. My office, she said. Tomorrow morning. The Crest Development Board convened at 9 the following day. Claire had prepared the documentation package over 2 days, working through the night on the 2nd. Daniel presented in 40 minutes. He was methodical and fair, and left no questions unanswered. The board voted to suspend Marcus Hale pending a full internal investigation. 6-1. The single dissenting vote wanted to wait for outside review. The chair noted the investor notification obligations that a 60-day delay would violate and overruled the hesitation. The Series B investors were contacted before noon. The asset schedule had to be corrected. The process was expensive and embarrassing and legally necessary. The Caldwell Corridor project was placed on restructuring hold. When the board cleared the room, Vivian stayed. Garrett stayed. Daniel gathered his papers quietly. "What do you want?" Vivian said. "Say it plainly." Garrett set a single page on the table between them. "3 things," he said. "First, Addendum C is formally recognized and entered into the project record. No acquisition proceeding. No condemnation. No further legal action on the parcel. Done. Second, the B7 drainage section is redesigned according to the actual geological data. Owen Tate oversees the revision and provides sign-off before any work restarts on that section." Vivian nodded once. "Third," he set his finger near the bottom of the page. "Meridian Infrastructure completed the structural baseline survey for this zone in 2016. That survey is the foundation for the corridor layout your firm has built this project on. When Cress acquired the Meridian assets in 2021, no licensing agreement was executed for the design work. No attribution, no compensation." Vivian read the bottom of the page. She was still. "The documented value of the design contribution has been independently assessed," Daniel said. "Conversion to a project equity stake representing 50% of the core infrastructure component of the Caldwell Corridor development is the proposed resolution." The room was quiet. Vivian looked at the number for a long time. Then she looked up at Garrett. "You could have asked for considerably more," she said. "You could have filed an injunction months ago and stopped everything." "I didn't want to stop it," Garrett said. "I wanted it built correctly. There's a difference." He paused. "Elena's restriction was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to be a standard, something that required whoever came next to do the work right." Vivian set the page down. "When did you start planning this?" she said. "When your first notice arrived. But I didn't move on it until you came to my door yourself. What did that change? It told me you were someone who paid attention. People who pay attention can eventually be reasoned with." He let that settle. "It just sometimes takes a while." She looked at him. Something crossed her face that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite something else. It was the expression of someone recalibrating a situation they thought they'd already understood. "I'll have our attorneys draft the equity agreement," she said. "I want it clean." "So do I," Garrett said. The agreement was signed 11 days later. Garrett Shaw became an equity stakeholder in the Caldwell Corridor project, the first outside party in the company's history to hold a direct infrastructure stake without contributing capital. Owen Tate was named Director of Site Engineering, a title that came with a salary that made him go briefly quiet when Vivian offered it across her desk. He accepted it in 2 sentences and didn't make a production of either one. Claire Moss was reassigned to the Contracts Division, with direct reporting to Vivian rather than the office of the CFO. She started the following Monday and did not look back. The B7 drainage section was redesigned over 3 weeks by a geotechnical firm working from the actual boring data. Owen's signature went on the cover sheet. The work restarted on a Thursday morning with the right pipe in the right ground. Marcus Hale's suspension became termination on day 31. The investor misrepresentation matter was referred to the State Securities Commission. Garrett didn't follow the proceedings. He'd said what needed saying. Ruth Calloway called on a Saturday morning to say she'd heard about the equity agreement from 3 separate people in 4 days. Garrett told her the house wasn't going anywhere. She told him that Elena would have gotten a real kick out of all this. He said he thought so too. Lily's science fair project on suspension bridge load distribution won 2nd place. She came home with a red ribbon and a considered opinion about the judging criteria that she delivered at dinner with complete seriousness. He listened to all of it. Vivian came to the construction site on a Thursday morning in early November. No team. No itinerary. She found Garrett reviewing the revised drainage plans with Owen near the B7 trench. She waited until Owen drifted back toward the crew. "I owe you an apology," she said, "for the day I came to your door." Garrett looked out at the trench, where the crew was setting the corrected pipe. "You're building it right now," he said. "That's enough." She stood beside him for a moment. "I didn't know about the addendum," she said. "I need you to know that. I know you didn't." "How?" "When I put those documents on the table in your conference room, you read them. You didn't look for a way out. You just read them." He paused. People who were part of it don't read like that. She was quiet. The sounds of the site filled the space between them. Machinery. Voices. The steady rhythm of construction work proceeding correctly. After a moment, she said, "She sounds like she was remarkable." "Your wife." Garrett looked at the revised grade stakes running along the corrected corridor. "She read every contract," he said. "Every page. Every time." Vivian nodded. She left a few minutes later, and he went back to the drawings. That evening, he came home to Lily already at the kitchen table, working through her homework, with one elbow propped on the table, and her chin in her hand. He made dinner. They ate. She told him about a kid in her class who'd brought a lizard in his backpack and caused what she described as a significant situation. After she went to bed, he sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then he went to the closet and brought down the property box. He lifted out the addendum 3 pages. Elena's signature on the last line. The pen pressed firmly. The letters even. And deliberate. Exactly the way she did everything. He set it on the table under the kitchen light. He put his hand over her signature and left it there. Outside, the street was quiet. A few houses down, a porch light was on. The neighborhood that had braced itself for change was still here, different now in ways most of it didn't yet understand. Inside the house on Perrin Street, the kitchen light stayed on for a long time. In the spring, the project would break ground again. It would be built correctly, down to the last inch of corrugated pipe and the last grade stake in compacted earth. The drainage would hold through every frost season. The corridor would run where it was supposed to run. And at the corner of Perrin and Aldgate, where the utility lines made their crucial turn beneath the ground, the house that Elena Shaw had chosen with her own savings and read every word of the contract to keep that house would still be standing, exactly where it had always been.